Hi there, just taking a bit of a trip down memory lane and looking at some photographs of some cues that I've owned over the years, and thought it was a great opportunity to share with you the beauty of these cues and also some of the design details, and also where appropriate the history behind some of these cues. And there's no finer place to start than the Burwat Champion Cue. It's one of the most iconic and popular cue designs ever, produced by Burroughes and Watts for about a 70-year period, starting in around about 1896 and kind of going through into the late 60s. Now, the cue followed the same design with some slight variations and tweaks over the years, as you should imagine. And I'm going to talk you through some of those details. Probably makes sense to start at the badge here. This badge, very simple and elegant badge design here. It's what we call a plate design. So actually, essentially it was a rectangle of material that's been screwed to the butt of the cue and then shaped so it blends in. Let's have a bit of a closer look. Like I say, very simple, very elegant. All of the wording's there, and that tends to be pretty consistent between all of the cues, although there is some variation in the font used and also some of the spacing at times. The earliest cues may well have had an ivory badge, and those are considered pretty rare. So if you get one of those, it might be worth doing some research and get in contact with me or somebody else, and we may well be able to talk you through a few more details of that. The earliest cues also tended to have a kind of a shorter, more square badge, whereas the later ones tended to be a little bit longer, more rectangular, and also the later ones tended to have a slightly more curved kind of base to them as well. Now, one of the things that's consistent on all of the badges of the Burwat Champion Cue is this registered number 292596, and that number applies to the design of the Burwat Champion Cue, and it doesn't apply to any individual cue, so it's not like an individual cue serial number. Now, taking a look at the badge from a slightly different view here, and what we see with these cues is they've been very popular and very well enjoyed, and the condition of the badge really does affect the value. This was a nice clean badge, completely intact, but often we see the badges worn quite a bit, almost to the point where the sides of the screw heads are becoming exposed at the base of the cue. These cues were produced before having a kind of a butt joint was popular, so do not expect to see a joint for a mini butt or an extension at the base of these cues. You can see here that there's a circle there, and a dowel has been inserted where the weight was added to this cue once it was produced. Now, the Burwat Champion Cue, like I said, it's a very iconic design, and it always follows this same pattern. Always hand spliced, always a single front splice, always a veneer. But there were some variations in that design, so I'm going to just talk to you about the variations of woods used. Now, if we look at the wood that the badge is sat on, this is a Coca-Cola wood. This was used in some of the later cues. In the very early cues, leadwood would have been used, and leadwood is a dark brown wood, whereas this wood used on this cue is actually kind of a reddish brown. Also, tulip wood was used for a period as well. Now, tulip wood is, I describe it as fiery. It has these orange and reds and yellows, often quite stripy in its grain pattern. Very pretty, so look out for those as well. Now, that front splice is sat on a veneer. A veneer is a thinner kind of slice of wood, and in this case it's sat on a satin wood veneer. On the Burwat Champion cues, typically it was always a light colour veneer. That's to give a nice bit of contrast, and I think it's very aesthetically pleasing. That's why it makes these cues so popular. Let's have a look from a different angle here, and I described this one as satin wood, and satin wood, the veneer has a nice grain pattern which tends to kind of catch the light and give this ripple or quilted effect. We'll take a look at that in another photo in a moment. Now, what you can see here is this is a hand spliced cue, and it's been hand spliced with black ebony. The earliest cues would have been spliced with an Indian rosewood, which is a much lighter brown colour and has a nice kind of stripy grain to it. Also, it's not unusual to see Makassar ebony used in the main splicing of these cues. Very attractive. But this one here as ebony for the main splicing. Now, as I said here, you can see the contrast between the ebony, the satinwood veneer and the Cocobolo front splice, and also you can see where that rippling or quilted effect that catches the light gives a nice detail. Now, I described this as a thick veneer. Generally, a thick veneer was always used on these Burwat Champion cues, and the thickness of that kind of does vary from cue to cue. There wasn't a standard, but you'd certainly expect to see a large piece of this veneer visible with the badge up. Now, here's a view where I can show you and talk to you about the thickness and how this cue is made up. So the wood on the left hand side is the main splicing of ebony. In the middle you can see that lighter strip is the satinwood veneer, and then on top of that satinwood veneer just to the right is the Cocobolo. Now, typically a veneer gives a bit of contrast to the woods used, and normally they're around about 1 millimeter or 1.5 millimeters thick, whereas this here was about 4 millimeters thick, which gives kind of a real nice visible face of the wood used. Very nice, it gives a good effect. Now, weight stamp. These cues, you'd expect to see a weight stamp, and that's important for dating the cue as well. So this is a later cue. I can tell that because it has the number over the weight. So it has 16 over OZ for ounce. There's plenty of information available online, so I suggest you go and check that out. It'd be really kind of helpful for you knowing the age of your cue. So this type of weight stamp was used from about 1920s onwards. Now, typically the shaft material used on Burwat Champion cues was ash or maple. There were some variations to that as well, but these are considered quite rare. So if you've got a Burwat Champion cue and it doesn't look like your traditional ash or maple, get in contact and we can kind of talk you through and just have a look to what it may be, because there may be some people quite interested in finding out a little bit more about that cue. Now, on top of this ash shaft on this cue is the ferrule. The ferrule is that brass band. It's a little bit blurry on this photo, but you can see it sits between the shaft wood and the leather tip. And on quite a few Burwats, Burwat Champion cues, we find it's a pigeon ring ferrule. And what that means is that brass ferrule is shorter than it is wide, so it's not very tall, and it almost gives like a wedding band appearance there. That's quite common. So bear that in mind. You could see that, and that's described as a pigeon ring ferrule. Now, just wrap up with a shot of that overall design, that iconic design. I've talked you through some of the variations. Condition is everything with the value of these. I would say it's an absolute must for a collector to have one of these in their collection, but also I would say it's an absolute must if you've got the opportunity to play a frame with one of these cues. Do so. It's a real kind of experience, and it helps you to understand the way that cues were made and the way that the game was played previously. There's stacks of information available on these cues online. There's some really good resources, so just a little bit of a Google search for Burwat Champion Cue will open up some really great websites run by some really great people. And I know there's a couple of videos online as well, so check those out. Now, if you have any questions over the Burwat Champion Cue, any information you'd like to share, then do so. Use the comments link. If you've just enjoyed the video, please give it a like and a thumbs up. And if you know somebody you think would enjoy the video as well, please give it a share. Also, finally, just check out some of the other videos. I'm going to do many similar videos on some old cues, but also some more modern contemporary cues as well, and talk you through and show you some of the beauty of the cues that I've owned over the years. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed that, and check out the other videos.